Hello and welcome to the CBB Supershow, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, the niche sports connoisseur and college sports guide. I am here breaking down to the slate for DraftKings, the 9-gamer. None of this split slate business. We've got the main. That's what we're going to be delving into. Big time day today. There's a lot of hits, few misses, but overall I think we did a pretty decent job. Riley Kugel predictably lets us down. Got the minutes, go figure, but definitely let us down there. And overall, Cam Jones, who was uber chalk, didn't quite have the game that we all expected him to. But that happens. The grind continues. This is a pretty solid slate ahead. I do have plans to show you guys a little bit that haven't joined the FTN network yet, what the projection sheet actually looked like to get an idea of what that content we provide each day is. We're going to do that near the end. Also going to break down the slate in a tried and true game-by-game standpoint. This is the way we love to do it, giving you any core plays, sneaks, overpriced, underpriced, maybe a couple of bets, some prop picks, all of that good stuff. If you're brand new to the show, please show us your support by hitting the like button. And if you're a regular, pull up your seat where you normally hang out, support us with those likes, and we will get going here, hitting the ground running. All right. There is a $250 Mania queue. They're still plugging away at this. Still plenty of opportunities to qualify if you haven't just yet. The flagship tournament of the day will be the 2K to first $15. And then we'll be getting into the weekend where there'll be some mini max and some much larger tournaments there. And the 222 will begin to be 10K to first here relatively soon. Let's keep going. Let's dive into the first game of the slate here. Michigan State versus Penn State. Big DVP spot here. We know Michigan State 3.5-point favorites, total of 144. Now, when Penn State is on the slate, you guys know we have a major DVP target here. Front court players against this Penn State defense go absolutely berserk time and time again. Last time the Spartans played against Penn State, we confidently played Malik Hall, who has had his struggles throughout his career, at a low ownership there, and he was only 5'9", 27 minutes against Penn State. This was a home game, mind you. 24 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists. He was absolutely just demolishing them on his way to one of his best games of his career, 42 fantasy points. He was coming off a 37 against Indiana State prior to that, back-to-back good games. And then you saw Northwestern right after that. He had -1. So you can see there are some ups and downs here when it comes to Malik Hall. And he is a little bit spendy at 6'5", which may ultimately keep his rostership down. But I'm a believer in DVP. Whenever there are obvious targets, regardless of what projections say, I'm all in. And Malik Hall will be a guy that I build my rosters around. You don't say that very often when it comes to Malik Hall, but I'm definitely going to be using him in this spot against Penn State. Way too obvious. Now, the perimeter defense of Penn State is much better. They've got Ace Baldwin, Nick Kieran. These are guys who force a lot of turnovers, generate steals. So it's not as great of a spot there, but we do have really cheap prices for guys like Tyson Walker, high usage guys, high shot volume. Last time he played Penn State, he also put up 40+, 22, 3, and 5. He got 6 steals in that one, which really was a just crazy game. Didn't have him in that one, but just to continue to watch him get those steals was kind of turning into a joke. But he has been a solid source of fantasy points, hitting about 30 pretty consistently. So I definitely don't mind a mini stack here of the Spartans. You look at AJ Hoggard at 7-2 after a 37 in their last game against Illinois. He's a little bit spendy. I prefer Walker and Hall over him, certainly. He wasn't as great against Penn State. He had about 20 at 6'9" last time, but we know minutes will be there. And then you have Jaden Akins, who is a solid source of semi-value there at 5'9". He went through some struggles, really hitting this low 20s mark, but lately he has caught fire. He's taking more shots. He's confidently hitting threes. He's playing like the guy that tested the NBA draft in the offseason, starting to look pretty good. He's more of a secondary option, but he's absolutely in play. Now, Michigan State had a bit of a different rotation last time out. Let's pull this up. Might help if I go to the right Michigan team. So more minutes, less minutes for our guy Trey Holloman, who has been a very solid bench piece for this team. He played only 9 minutes against Illinois. Cohen Carr played 9. Jackson Keeler played 13. And then we saw Carson Cooper play 22 minutes there. Matty Sissoko played 10 minutes as a starter. He is that dreaded fifth Beatle, if you will, in the starting lineup. His minutes are not going to be there. He might play a max of 18 and 19. He had a decent game against Penn State last time out, but it looks to me like Cooper and Keeler are starting to take his minutes, and they may be getting Cohen Carr even more minutes as well. So that bench for the Spartans is kind of a no-fly zone. It's a little bit hard to tell, but I do have at least some interest in a player like Carson Cooper at 4-2, especially with him playing 19-plus minutes in 3 straight. This is a matchup he can take advantage of fully, especially if Sissoko is going to continue to play less. Cooper doesn't need to do a whole hell of a lot at 4-2 at 20 minutes. I can envision him getting 5 or 6 rebounds, scoring 2 or 3 points, whatever, getting a steal or a block, and pretty much being right there at the 4X price point. And you could even pull down more rebounds here against this Penn State team, depending on what his minutes are like. So definitely like Cooper as a value there. Holloman at 3.9 would have been really great. I think the minutes maybe was a matchup thing there against Illinois. Typically, we're used to him seeing him play 20-plus minutes off the bench. But as they start to play more guys, maybe that is going to be something that continues. So you can't really use him right now. Carr is only 3.1. Maybe if you're doing some alt builds, you want to throw him into something. Perhaps Jackson Keeler at 3.3, playing those 13 minutes. If we think he's going to eclipse 15, he's at least interesting there at near min price as well. But for the most part, Malik Hall and Tyson Walker are 2 very good players to utilize in your main build in this particular matchup. On the Penn State side, Kanye Clary is back, has been back for a few games, hasn't started, but been available dealing with this face injury. It's clearly affected him. He played 18 minutes against Iowa, 14 against Northwestern, wasn't particularly viable in either of those games. Can't really use him. What it's doing is causing his price to cascade, which is nice, but we're still not in a position to be able to use him until he gets back in the starting lineup, and we know for sure he's going to play 30-plus minutes. Ace Baldwin's an okay option at 8.4. It's a little bit spendy, but his peripherals are insane. Now, he got completely tanked against Michigan State. They did a phenomenal job shutting him down. He was 0 for 7, 10 fantasy points. Since that putrid 10 fantasy point game, he has hit 30-plus in 7 of his last 9. He is a very, very good option, but again, a little bit spendy and more of what I would refer to as a luxury play, not somebody that we're going to be able to start our lineups with and probably not end up as a last man in type either. That leaves us with very few options on Penn State. Now, I still like Jameel Brown, who I know only played the 11 minutes against Northwestern. That was a tough matchup. We didn't have much value, so there wasn't a lot of places to go there. I do think Brown's working himself into a position to be a big-time rotational piece for this program. Next year, we're going to be talking about him a lot. He is only 3.7. Minutes aren't safe enough to really use in anything beyond a alt build, but this team needs offense. He is instant offense. 3 triples attempted against Northwestern, one of which was like late in the first half. Beat the shot clock, knocked it down. He hit 3 of 8 against Iowa the game before and 4 of 5 against Indiana. Kid can absolutely shoot. I like having shares of him here, especially with Puff Johnson having the questionable tag technically day-to-day. And then we also have Demetrius Lilly on the injury report, who's also listed as questionable after missing last game. So there are some minutes here to go around, and especially until Clary is fully ready to go, playing his normal amount of minutes, I think Jameel Brown will continue to get some of that time. You do have DeMarco Dunn at 5.1. He had a nice game against Rutgers there with Clary out. Clary's back. His numbers are down. It's really just taking the Michigan State side in this one. All right, next game on the slate, Xavier versus Seton Hall. The Pirates are 2-point favorites, total of 145. Seton Hall, man, they are a team that I did not expect with their NIL program lacking to be as good as they've been. They come in at 15-9 after a blowout loss to Villanova. I do think they're going to run out of steam here, ultimately end up maybe being an NIT team, but they are going to be a tough out the rest of the way, and they're not going to roll over and die. That one against Villanova, this is a team that I expect to have some games like that at times. They've been playing a bit over their head. This is a close one, I think, against Xavier. We'll probably see this one have overtime potential, and we'll see a lot of the minutes spike back up. Due to that blowout, we saw a lot of fewer minutes, like Richmond playing 25, Adaiwusu playing 27, Dre Davis 28. Expect all of those guys in a closer game to surge past 30 minutes with relative ease. And Jaden Bediako to probably even play somewhere between 25 and 26. The bench is a little bit lackluster, but it does have a lot of youth. Guys like Isaiah Coleman, Jaquan Sanders, Malachi Brown, David Tubeck. These are all future pieces that are interesting. Right now, they've been playing Isaiah Coleman 15 to 20 minutes regardless, and they're starting to play Jaquan Sanders more. He did get in there for 18 minutes. Very raw, didn't do a whole lot. None of these guys you can really utilize, but the prices on Seton Hall in this great matchup are at least workable. Adaiwusu at 5'8", he is the most viable. That's a nice little buy low spot for him. He's not going to do anything in his game logs that makes you super excited, but I do think he's a safe option here in this spot. He will have the opportunity to rack up steals, and if we can just get him to hit a couple of threes, he's definitely going to be in a position to beat value here. Alamir Dawes is too expensive for me at 6'8". He's too reliant on his scoring. He does score with the best of them in the Big East, but just no peripherals really on a consistent basis. Can't pay that price for him. Dre Davis at 7'5", it's a little bit spendy for him, but before the blank against Villanova, back-to-back over 40 fantasy point performances, granted against the lowly DePaul and Georgetown, but it's not as if Xavier's defense is much better than them, and he did have 33 last time against Xavier when they lost by 20, and he shot 21 different shots, 8 for 21 from the field, 33 fantasy points. So Dre Davis definitely in play here. Guard forward eligibility as well. And then Kaderi Richmond at 8K. This is the cheapest we've had him in a while. I would suspect Kaderi ends up being chalky. The last time he was this cheap, I think you have to go into last year. Just quickly scrolling through here, 9K, 8.5, 8.9, 8.7, 9.3, 8.8, 8.4. To start the season, he was at 8.3. So that was the closest we had. Last year, we had him a bunch of times at 6 and 7K. Hasn't been this cheap. Now, you look at the last game, yeah, for him, it was a down game, 21 fantasy points in 25 minutes. DePaul only played 18 minutes there due to the blowout. And then in a close game against Georgetown, just under 30, he put up 44. So look for him to get that big number, 32, 34, 35 minutes, and be in a position here to absolutely obliterate this price. Definitely one of my favorites. Now, he has been dealing with an injury, and there were games missed, and maybe that factors into some of the reason why he hasn't been playing his normal minutes. But I'm going to go into this one quite comfortable with using him in a lot of different lineups, and especially looking like it's going to be a main lineup play for me. And then Jaden Bediako at 6'1". Forwards are tough. He's not a big usage guy, going to have to do most of his work on the glass, but lucky for him, Xavier's front court isn't particularly strong. He did have 9 rebounds last time they played Xavier, but 6'1" is a little bit of a higher price for him, more of a secondary option at best. For Xavier, it continues to be the trio of Quincy Olivare, Davian McKnight, and Des Claude. Claude is 7'5". He's my go-to, playing nearly 40 minutes here the last couple. McKnight at 7'9" is an okay play as well. Once he gets above Claude, I tend to look the other way. This is because he put up 41 against Creighton recently, and then Olivare at 9'3". I kind of say that every slate. It's spendy for me. Now, he put up a 43 against Creighton, which is huge, coming off the tail of his 71 against DePaul, and 26 against Villanova, which was preceded by a 43 against St. John's. Don't hate the play. He's just way too spendy for me. I rarely find myself rostering him, and he's not always, and it's at these higher prices, very rostered by the masses. So when he does break the slate, it doesn't hurt you all that much. It is worth noting, though, he took 20 shots against Seton Hall in their prior matchup. He put up 41. So if you want to use Olivare, you can, but it is definitely a high price. I'd rather take that discount with my guy, Des Claude. I'll take his 30s, 32s. He's just churning out a good solid number there for us. He wasn't great against Seton Hall, only 20 the last time that they faced off, but I do like him if you want to go anywhere. Abo Osman, who is only 5'5", he has been dealing with foul issues. That's been the big thing. Is he gets St. John's because of a late technical. He actually had 6 fouls, so don't get too excited there. College basketball did not, in fact, move to 6 fouls, but that is how he ended up on that number. Only played 19 minutes against Creighton. He just couldn't get anything going against Kalkbrenner there. Did have a nice outing against Villanova, but he has just been shooting poorly. 1 for 7, 1 for 5, 1 for 7. Very difficult. He is an elite rim protector, does rebound better than almost anybody else in the Big East, but he's just not a big scorer, and it has been weighing down his fantasy stats overall, which is why he's so cheap at 5'5". Seton Hall front court, he definitely has a potential for a big game. Last time he faced them, he did have 5 swats, 16 points, 10 rebounds, on his way to a 50. So a career outing for Abu in this matchup against Seton Hall. It'll be interesting to see if he can stay out of foul trouble on the road here. How many people will be rostering him? I feel like a play like this, we want to be underweight compared to the field if he's super chalky. If everybody's fading him, then I want to be overweight. I want to play the leverage there, which way it's going to go. I don't want to be in line with the rest of the field, though. It's just way too much of a volatile play. As far as any other values, Dalen Swain at 4.5, he's got a lot of talent. His minutes have been trending in the right direction. It is a very lean value, though, so it's nothing super special. And then Trey Green at 3.6, but his minutes have been dwindling down as well. But I do really like his game. Problem is, this is a guard-heavy team. There's just no minutes for him there. All right, next game on the slate, Miami. Hey, there he is, the Illinois ambassador. I got the rec specs on today, Scott. I want to seem professional, but I don't know. You guys wear anyone in the crowd here wears contacts, but I do. And one of them today had a tear, and I had to wear it that way like all day. And man, it's just brutal. Contacts are the most brutal thing ever. But I'm too worried about getting LASIK. So the contact show goes on. But that is why I'm wearing the rec specs today, because my eyes are absolutely in pain, on fire. But I don't want to complain too much, because then the guy will be back to troll me in the comments about how I'm a Gen Z whiner and should work outside. But never mind the fact that I'm almost 40. I don't know if that qualifies for being Gen Z or not, but I digress. Miami versus Clemson, total of 151. Clemson 7.5-point favorites. Now Miami, man, how quickly they go from being this, rugged, let's buy this, let's pay Nigel Pack, let's make this deep tournament run, quote unquote, sell our souls for a title. Didn't quite finish the job, but made a deep run. A lot of excitement, losing Isaiah Wong, that obviously proving to be very, very difficult. Jordan Miller, they had the perfect replacement for him in Matthew Cleveland. But the main problem here is that Wong was way more important than Miami than I think anybody could have possibly realized, because there is a talented starting lineup here. But also the obvious fact here is that they can't stay healthy. Everyone in that starting lineup has had a turn missing time, from Norchad Omier, Matthew Cleveland, Wooga Poplar. We saw Bensley Joseph. I think actually he might be the most healthiest of the 5. Nigel Pack's been in and out of the lineup. Now Nigel Pack comes in this one officially with a questionable tag. Day-to-day is what they're calling it here. One of the Miami beats. We'll see what happens. Keyshawn George, who missed a game after he was the one benefiting from all these injuries, stepping in and playing 30-plus minutes in a bunch of games. Now he's dealing with an ankle issue that cost him a game. I would be very shocked if he played. I do think it'll turn out that Nigel Pack does play, Keyshawn George doesn't, and that means everybody in the starting 5 will be playing 35-plus minutes. Oh, unless Norchad gets into foul trouble. And the nice thing here is, even if Norchad does, Larinaga won't have much choice but to continue playing him. The price of 8.9 on Norchad in this spot against Clemson is tasty. He does have high upside whenever he's under 9K. Clemson's defense can cause issues, and they have a bunch of guys who can draw fouls. So there is a little bit of risk there in that regard for Norchad, but he's a really nice GBP and Q play team because I don't know that a lot of people will necessarily go there because they have that Iowa-Maryland game. You've got some guys on Notre Dame. You've got that Auburn group. UConn's playing DePaul. Tennessee, Arkansas is a very fantasy-friendly game. So I don't know a lot of people taking Norchad on the road here, and that gives you a really good opportunity for maybe a sub 10% slate breaker type of play. Bensley Joseph is 5'7". He has not been particularly great as a fantasy option for this team, but he's going to be thrust into these larger minutes. You saw he played 33 minutes against Virginia. He played 36 minutes against North Carolina. That's going to continue. They're going to have to utilize him a lot, and he's going to have to take more of the offensive load. Had a pretty solid outing against North Carolina, 6 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, and 4 steals. Can't count on that aspect of his game. If he gets a couple of threes down and then he adds those 3 to 5 of each category there, we're looking at a pretty sneaky play in Bensley Joseph. I think a lot of people are turned off about him as the probably the worst starter of the group. But when you're talking about so many guys ailing, he just has to do a lot more. So I am on with Bensley Joseph. He's at this price point, sub 6K, that we can really utilize. Instead of going down, when we think of value, sub 5K, it's been pretty lean. Have to start retraining our brain and thinking of values as sub 6K. And these guys in this 5 to 6K range are very, very valuable. Now, I know Cam Jones and Riley Kugel in those ranges today didn't work out, but theoretically, those are the type of guys we really want to pepper our lineups with. They're going to pan out more often than not at those prices. Now, if Pat can't go, that means we're either going to see more AJ Casey in a bigger lineup, who played 8 minutes off the bench there in the last game, or Michael Nwoko, who usually plays more if Norchad can't go, or Ja'Kai Robinson, who we did see play 13 minutes. I could theoretically see him be the one to jump into the starting lineup. He is min price. We've seen Christian Watson in the past take a semi-starting role, play additional minutes. He's a little bit raw, overwhelmed in the moment, so it looks like they're giving Ja'Kai some more minutes here, at least they did in the last game. And then we had even seen Paul Dijouet play some additional minutes, at least against Virginia, in the game against NC State. So Larrañaga is desperately looking to get minutes for these bench guys, just in case they have anyone heading into the postseason. At this rate, they're looking NIT bound, going into it, not having no depth at all, or guys who are just completely lost in the moment. So keep an eye there on that status. Lucky for us, it is the second wave of games right after the Michigan State game locks, which is a half an hour earlier than usual. I do think Ja'Kai Robinson could potentially be the player that we're able to swap to and have a min-price player in our lineups, which will allow us to open up everything else up top. So we'll see how that goes. If Pack plays, though, that won't leave much for the rest of those guys. Clemson side, Jack Clark. We're going right back to Jack Clark. Last game, a lot of people didn't realize Jack Clark was back. Like, he's been playing off the bench and steadily getting minutes, and a lot of people were just like, why are we coring Jack Clark? Well, he has started back-to-back games now, and he's not – obviously he's like the 4th, 5th, 6th option on this team at times, but he's tough as nails. He's a really high-quality rebounder. They brought him in to be kind of like that guy. It's really cliche to say, but like the glue guy type, right, where he does the things that don't show up in the box score. The nice things for Clark is he rebounds at such a high level. He is going to pay this price off more often than not when he's getting 30 minutes, and he's especially so in a matchup against Miami, in which Clemson can really put up some points against them. You saw 10 rebounds against Syracuse, put up about 20 fantasy points, 18 against North Carolina, which was 6.7 rebounds. He's had some fast starts, faded in the second half of both the last two games, but at this rate, I don't really care. As long as he puts up the 19 to 20 that we're looking for, I'm happy. He fills a forward slot that's traditionally pretty hard to fill on DraftKings, and it's really just that simple when it comes to Jack Clark. As far as anyone else, you really can only look at 4 other guys here, because everybody else on the secondary line or the bench play or the second group, Chauncey Wiggins, RJ Godfrey, Dylan Hunter, those guys, they're very cheap, but they don't play enough minutes to matter. They may have a pop game here or there, but they're just not consistent enough or good enough for us to utilize right now. So it leaves us with either a 5'8" Chase Hunter, who's playing a ton of minutes right now, and starting to settle back into that facilitator role that he was so good in last year, a 6'9" Joey Girard, who did have a fairly decent game returning to Syracuse. It wasn't the revenge game that maybe we wanted, but he did put up 18, 4, and 2 for 29. That's solid. We know he's going to play 37, 38 minutes here. Ian Schiffelin, who got into foul trouble last game and early, then the second half, he couldn't stop turning it over, and they ended up not being able to play him much. So he was pretty well a bust, all things considering. However, a bust for Ian Schiffelin these days is still 25 fantasy points. So think about that. Man turns it over 6 times and still puts up a 25. He could be in line for a big, big game. We're talking 35 or 40 in the spot against Miami because he's going to mostly avoid Norchad. I think people are going to look at it and in their mind think, oh, Schiffelin, why would I want to roster him? He's 7-2. It's a little too high priced. In my mind, he busted last game. People aren't really going to be noticing. And suddenly you have a really sneaky option at sub 10% ownership capable of dropping a huge, huge game. Last time against Miami, he had 11 points and 11 rebounds, a stone cold double-double there, put it up 33, and that was in 30 minutes at Miami. Now they're going to be at home. Everybody's going to be looking to obviously Jack Clark's going to be an auto lock, I think, for most people as long as he continues to start. And then people are going to be considering a pay up like PJ Hall at 9K. Nobody's going to be looking at Ian Schiffelin. Very rarely do they. Hall had some foul issues there against Miami. He ended up with just 23, which allowed Schiffelin to have such a big game. I do think that ends up happening once again. Hall has to deal with a more physical Norchad Omier. Obviously, being at home, that is a little bit better for him in terms of he'll probably get a favorable whistle, but Ian Schiffelin is a very, very sneaky play. You're playing him in the 250, perhaps trying to win another Mania seat, Scott. Schiffelin might be your guy. All right, moving on to the next game here. We have Georgia Tech versus Notre Dame. Yeah, very professional. My eyes feel like they are I was going to say the name of a STD, but this is a kid-friendly show. It feels like there's just like hot chili pepper sauce in it or something. It's just brutal. All right, Georgia Tech versus Notre Dame. This is a game here. Only fans of the program or DFS degenerates like us would really give a damn about a game like this. Total of 132.5. Notre Dame favored by 3.5. I don't know that I'm ever comfortable betting Notre Dame as favorites, even dating back to the non-conference. They had that game against Western Carolina, which is actually a really fun team. They were favored by like 8, and it was like, wait a minute, no way. This Western Carolina team with Vontarius Woolbright, they're not 8-point dogs, and they did end up beating Notre Dame by 10 at their place. So it just feels really off having to bet them. Ken Palm does have it as a 66-63 game in favor of Notre Dame, but I think Georgia Tech just honestly wins it outright or at least covers. So I'll probably be throwing some money on Georgia Tech, which isn't as bad of a bet this year as it has been in the past. I do like what Damian Stoudemire's doing with this group. Now, Notre Dame has switched up their starting lineup a little bit. They're still rolling, or at least last game, with Marcus Burton, Keba Njai, and Tay Davis. They did move Logan Imes out of the starting lineup after he started 3 straight, and J.R. Konisia, who had been starting the entire season, but he didn't start against Duke, played only 18 minutes, and he played even less against Virginia Tech off the bench. They do bring in coach's son, Braden Shrewsbury, who has started the last 2 games, played 31 and 32 minutes, been a scoring machine. He's in there to shoot threes, and he is absolutely chucking, doing that very well. And then Kerry Booth, who seemed like he maybe was in the doghouse there for a while, played a combined 17 minutes over the last 2 games. Then he ends up playing 24 minutes against Virginia Tech in relatively productive games. So there's a little bit of a switch up here happening for Notre Dame with Micah Shrewsbury trying to find some answers. I think they knew they were going to have some struggles this year. They're 8-16, but Shrewsbury shot rate is now eclipsing over 23%, shooting 37% from long range. The freshman is somewhat interesting. This is a good spot for him. He's only 5'4". I do want some shares of him, especially knowing he's going to play over 30 minutes. Not a guy that's going to give us much in the peripheral standpoint. He's just out there to chuck threes. Maybe we'll get a prop for him to shoot threes, but you'll see he has 3 of his last 5 hit 4 or more triples. Just an absolute insane shooter. Marcus Burton at 7'8", an unsung hero. Nobody rosters him ever. I think early in the season he got some rostership, but most people just kind of ignore him. But you see he's been putting up some really big games. He had 44 against Virginia Tech. 6 steals, which is pretty a big anomaly there. 30 against Duke, 33 against Pittsburgh, 32 against Virginia, and then 27 against Boston College over the last 5. So he's been very steady, strong performer. Would have loved to have gotten him at that 7-1 price that he just was, but when you deliver a 45, these things tend to happen. But I do like him as a GPP type of play as well. And then, you have every other player on the team under 5K. Tay Davis is interesting at 4.9. Has been down the last couple of games, but this is a matchup I could see him performing quite well in as long as he stays out of foul trouble, but that is a big if. And then you have Booth sitting there at 4.5 now back in the starting lineup. He's at least interesting because he was one of their better players in the month of January prior to going into the doghouse. On the Georgia Tech side, Bayandongo is only 6K. Now I took a huge whiff, and it wasn't even that bad because he didn't blow the doors off the slate, but against Wake Forest at 6-2, coming off of a couple of down games in which he played less minutes than usual because of the head injury. I wasn't expecting him to be super chalky. And the play that I used, I can't even remember now, somebody in that same range as him put up 27, so it didn't matter, thank God. But Bayandongo ended up being 45 to 50% owned on that slate, which was absolutely wild. You did see he fouled out against Louisville in just 15 minutes. That tends to happen. He does have a massive mismatch against this Notre Dame front court. They really don't have anybody there to deal with his athleticism and physicality. So as long as he doesn't beat himself, as in getting a bunch of fouls, he should be in line for a pretty big game and only priced at 6K there. So I would like to think or guess here that he's probably going to be chalky, knowing that he just was at this price 2 slates ago and was extremely high owned. It was actually kind of shocking. Last time against Notre Dame, he played 42 minutes, obviously went an extra period or two, 7 of 15 from the field, 9 rebounds, 16 points, put up 33. And this was in that stretch where he kind of announced himself to the rest of the world and was putting up 30s with just ridiculous consistency. So have to like Bayandongo here. Probably one of the few Georgia Tech plays that I can say we can use it in our main build. Now, Georgia Tech, similar to Notre Dame, has been messing around with their starting lineup. We're still seeing Miles Kelly, Bayandongo, and Nathan George, but we are seeing Tafara Gapare in and out of the starting lineup. He started last game, played 24 minutes. Ebenezer Duana has been injured. They are dealing with several injuries, actually. Debo Coleman also missing time. So it looks like Gapare could be in line to play big minutes once again. He's only priced at 4.6. I really like his rates, the way he plays. Next to Bayandongo, he has actually got a lot more upside than you probably realize, and he's somebody that isn't afraid to take shots. He's not a particularly great three-point shooter, but he does get volume, and it seems like Damon Stoudemire has extended a very long leash for him. So that is a potential value to look at that nobody else will be considering whatsoever. And then we've seen Kwesi Reeves, who remains a starter, but his minutes are dwindling to the point where he's playing less than 20 now. Really hard to get behind using him. We are seeing Tashawn Cloud, who had a really big, non-con for the first 2 weeks of the season and then fall all the way to the bottom of the pecking order. Now he's starting to play massive minutes off the bench, 28, 25, 24, and 22 in 4 of his last 5. He's a semi-value that we can look at there. Would like to see him kind of usurp Kwesi Reeves in the starting 5. And then Carter Murphy, who barely ever plays. He's the Air Force transfer. Did end up playing 21 minutes against Louisville there off the bench. Something to consider there if he's going to be getting those continuous minutes with these injuries. A lot would have to do with Debo Coleman and what his status would be, though. All right, moving right along here. It's South Carolina against Auburn. The total of 137. Now, Auburn's 11-point favorites, and I had to look at that one 3 or 4 times. And as much as I like Auburn and think they're good, man, the disrespect that Lamont Paris and the Gamecocks are getting, this seems a little bit ridiculous to me. South Carolina has been so good under Lamont Paris. He's the clear SEC Coach of the Year. They have a 7-game winning streak, 8th longest in the country right now, and they're 21-3. Losses to Georgia, Alabama, and Clemson, coming off just a surgical victory against Vanderbilt. Held on against Ole Miss. beating Tennessee on the road, which was such a phenomenal win, beating Kentucky. Now they're playing an Auburn team that, yes, they're tough, but man, this is so many points. Ken Palm does have it 74-64 in favor of Auburn as well, but I feel like the way that South Carolina plays, they're going to give Auburn a lot of problems, and they're going to slow things way down. And that's the way Paris has been able to have success with this team and the group that he has. They have been very successful forcing the other team to play their tempo instead of the other way around. So I think people might be looking at it because Auburn has this reputation for being a tempo team, lots of fantasy goodness, and wondering, or perhaps mini stacking this game without realizing that this one could turn into a lower scoring affair with a lot of fouls. So I am a little bit worried in that regard. That means I'm probably not jamming Janai Broom into everything like I ordinarily would do. He's priced at 9.6. Pretty tough outing against Florida for him, putting up the 27. I don't love this matchup whatsoever. South Carolina does have the front court presence and size and physicality on the glass to give him some trouble. He is tough as nails. He's not somebody who will back away from, a physical matchup down low, but we have seen him in the past kind of struggle with other size. So I don't know that we can get behind paying that price point for him. Jalen Williams, who had that massive 41 against Alabama, you can see paying $7K is just not really in the cards. He had 5 against Florida there. A lot of up and down performances, and usually settles in as this kind of 25, 26 fantasy point per game player. That's just a little bit too high for me. My favorite is still Chad Baker. He doesn't start. He's priced affordably. Really is kind of the X factor on this team. Even when he's having a rough game, and he did against Florida too, he's still pretty much coasting into 20 fantasy points. Only 6 real points, but he did have 4 assists, 7 rebounds, and just contributed across the board. Gets himself to the foul line a lot. That's where he generates points, and that's where we want to look to Chad Baker in the future, especially in closer games, or what we project to be closer games, and as they get into the tournament. I think we'll find that Chad Baker is a really marquee DFS option in March. Keep putting him into your player pool and keeping him around, because he's going to be a guy that we use a lot, especially if his price dips below this 6.2K range. He's going to be around 5.5, 5.8 with another bad game, perhaps. Trey Donaldson at 5.4, really the only other player on Auburn I would consider. We're still in that 18 to 22 minute range for most of their secondary plays. KD Johnson, Chaney Johnson, Denver Jones, Aiden Holloway, the list goes on. Just not a very good matchup, and we've kind of learned here not to target against South Carolina as much. So as much as I like Chad Baker, he's definitely a secondary option. I just don't think I'm paying that premium for Auburn. On the South Carolina side, same token, Auburn's defense has been pretty legit, so targeting against them isn't necessarily the best idea. But man, Colin Murray-Boyles, how crazy has it been? And we've been rostering him every single slate since he got into the starting lineup and beyond. It was only a little under a month ago where we were rostering him at 4K, getting hyped about him getting this first start against Georgia at 4-5, and he's just taken off ever since. That game against Vanderbilt was ridiculous. He is just playing so well. I actually need him to slow down a little bit, because if this continues, I feel like he's going to be one and done, and we need him for next year because he's going to be an absolute stud. Granted, he's played against Ole Miss, Georgia, Vanderbilt, some easier interiors to dominate, and he did struggle in that tougher matchup against Tennessee, in which they did still win. So jury's still out on how he does against upper tier competition here in the SEC. There has been a lot of pace-up matchups and weak interiors, such as Georgia and Arkansas and some of these other teams that he's really excelled against. So I don't know that we can actually pay an 8K price point for him in a main build on the road against Auburn, but I definitely don't feel like I'm going to be fading him fully anytime soon. This has kind of been my adoptive guy this year, and I'm very, very high on CMB for the future. It's just a really difficult price to pay. This is the point where I tell you Meechie Johnson is way too cheap at 6K, and you all collectively roll your eyes. I know he is struggling. He is shooting poorly, and I don't know what the deal is. Like, the first half against Vandy was pretty solid and then just disappears for long stretches. We need to get him over that hump, because earlier in the season, he was having those big games, the clear alpha on this team. His shot attempts have gone down. His efficiency has gone down. His actually assist rate and facilitation ability has gone up. That's one good thing, but we need Meechie Johnson to be scoring. These 3, 6, 6, 11, 0 real point games, these just can't happen. And it's caused his price to continue to fall. So we have a nice buy low spot for Michi Johnson, which is basically the same thing I've said for the last 6 South Carolina slates. And just like Ray Battle, who had been struggling, priced below 6K. And I'm talking about, hey, we're going to keep on rolling Ray Battle. And I know a lot of you jumped off, but he delivered the other day. Same thing can happen with Michi Johnson. We're just going to keep playing these cheap guys with the high usage rates because they're going to break out of their slumps. He can't continue to shoot 20% forever. He's going to have some positive regression here very, very soon. Might be this matchup here against Auburn, especially if CMB gets clamped and they need scoring from somewhere. Talon Cooper at 6'6" is kind of just a mediocre play. BJ Mack at 6'7", same thing. He had a big game against Vanderbilt, but I don't trust him very much at all. He gets into foul trouble on the road. Also, his minutes are a little bit erratic. They rarely reach 30. He takes a ton of ineffective and inefficient shots, so I'm not really that high on BJ Mack either. And then we have value, Miles Stude, who is only 4'2", pretty much guaranteed 20 minutes. I think it's time to get him back into the starting lineup here. I would definitely be using him in a main lineup if that was the case. Even if not, depending on how your build is and you're starved for value, I think he's fine to use. Just have to understand he's probably going to struggle to give you a straight 4X unless that shot's falling. He did take 10 shots against Vanderbilt, 7 of which were threes. He only made 1, but the game before that against Ole Miss, he made 4 of 5. So that's kind of his role on the team, is to just chuck threes when he's out there. Occasionally, he will add some peripherals here and there, but that is his main role. And there were times earlier this season where people were using Stude at 5'5" and 5'8". So 4.2 is not that bad of a price for him, honestly. And then guys like Zach Davis, Jacoby Wright, with Stude back, their minutes have been dwindling. Opportunities have been dwindling. Those guys are not really usable right now at all. All right, next game on the slate, Iowa versus Maryland. This is a game that should be targeted heavily by most. The total is 144.5. I think the over is in play here. The Terps 5-point favorites. Now, our resident Iowa expert in the Discord, Markzilla, had put a quote or a statement from Coach McCaffrey that they're going to be playing their upperclassmen more in this part of the season. Sounds like that means Patrick McCaffrey's minutes are here to stay. He's played 25 and 22 over the last 2. His price isn't super cheap anymore. We're not talking 3.943 though. We're talking about 5.1, which is still a value price. And it does look like he's going to get those big minutes. So he's in play for sure. I don't particularly like him at all as a play, especially not at 5.1. But I do think he ends up being relatively chalky for a slate this sized. We're talking like 25, maybe 30% ownership. Kind of feel like at forward, that's going to be how people play it. As far as the rest of Iowa, the matchup on paper is really not very good. These two teams did play earlier. Let's pull that up. 69-67 win for the Terps. In that one, Jameer Young was just nasty, doing whatever he wanted against them. Tony Perkins had 20 points, 3 steals. He was the best play out there. Owen Freeman had 14 and 9, and then a lot of mediocre-ish 6-7 type of stat lines. Nothing really that we need to pay up for. As much as I like Tony Perkins and feel really confident about him in any matchup, 8.6 is a bit of an excessive price for me to consider on the road against Maryland in a tough spot. Peyton Sandfort, who is at 8.2, that's a little pricey for him. He finally kind of delivered for us against Minnesota. It was 43. He's been kind of dogging us out there in the few times that we've used him, but it is the 3rd time in the last 5 games he has eclipsed 40 DK points. So out there for 37 minutes in a close game, he's at least in consideration, even though it's a bad matchup. This could be one of those games where we just see multiple overtimes and all these game stacks paying out from it. Ben Krikke, who only played 17 minutes in that game against Minnesota, pretty interesting. Wasn't really in foul trouble. We saw Patrick McCaffrey playing more. So as McCaffrey's minutes go up, it looks like he may kind of pip Krikke there. We'll see if that continues. Laj Dembele, who had been playing additional minutes the last couple of games, he only played 2. So there is some merit here to what is being said about this Iowa rotation and maybe going to 6 or 7 guys at max. Owen Freeman at 7-9. He is the, ultimate GBP play. If he can get Julian Reese in foul trouble, he can absolutely dominate the glass. If Reese gets him into foul trouble, then Reese is going to dominate. I tend to think the home team there would be having the advantage, but you saw what kind of upside that Owen Freeman had against Minnesota. 52 DK points thanks to a 17 and 14 game, 4 blocks as well. This is the future Luka Garza here. Next year, you're going to be talking about him at 9 and 10K. He's just got such a strong game, high fantasy point per minute number. A lot of his rates are similar to the younger years of Luka Garza. Very lazy comparison, I know, but he's going to put up numbers like him pretty consistently next year. And then you have Josh Dix at 5'2", one of those last guy in types. He had his run as a valuable DFS asset. I don't particularly like him at all, but he is going to play 30-plus minutes here, so it's not a bad look if you want to utilize him, but he is certainly a pretty mediocre option at this rate. On the Maryland side, this is where we want to get a ton of exposure. The last couple of times, Iowa games, not the Minnesota game, that one went off the rails, but some of these Iowa games haven't been as fantasy friendly as we would have expected, and they've held some of their opponents in check. I do not think this will be a game in which they do that, though. Jameer Young, I just talked about Perkins at 8.6. If you want to pay up on this slate, Jameer Young's a very good one. And looking around at the different options, like I'm not paying for Oliveri very often, me personally. Janai Broom's a bit expensive. We just talked about the matchup. PJ Hall, it's maybe a tougher spot for him against Norchad, although he's good. Then you have Dalton Connect, who's been just unbelievable. Tristan Newton in a possible blowout. Norchad O'Meara in a tough spot. There's not a lot of like slam dunk pay-ups here. There's some like okay or good, pay-ups that you can feel all right about rostering, but none that you're like super gung-ho about. I do think that makes Jameer Young one of the better 8K plus guys. That's not on UConn, like if we're not worrying about blowouts. Really like Young here. He's going to be playing majority of the game, super high usage rate. Assist rate has been spiking, contributing in all categories, rebounding as well as anybody at his position and size. Just a ridiculous amount of minutes at Ohio State game, 47, 26, 7, and 4. Against Rutgers, he yanked down 12 rebounds, which was just astronomical for him. He is really worth the price of admission here at this price point. Did put up a solid 39 against Iowa last time, 22, 7, and 4. This one has overtime potential as well. This is exactly the type of game I would envision going the extra period or two. I don't know how it's going to shake out yet. I haven't tried to build a lineup, but Jameer Young's definitely a guy that I'm looking to roster in droves. Then you have Julian Reese at 8-1. I worry about fouls with him always. How could you not? But Jesus, he's been so good. You throw out the Michigan State game in which he was just a jabroni and fouling every 5 seconds. He's put up 40 plus in 2 of his last 5. 35 plus in 4 of his last 5 per DK scoring. And he managed 49 minutes in that, the extra periods there against Ohio State. It's a ton of minutes for him. He did have 4 fouls, but that came later. 49 minutes. Just ridiculous stuff for Reese. But he should do well. He had 41 against Iowa last time, 17 and 9, 5 blocks. Definitely a good play. If you prefer to go Reese over Young because of a forward, I couldn't fault you at all for that. Both are solid options. Then it gets interesting. Jordan Geronimo missed a game due to the hand issue that he has, considered highly questionable. Right now, the initial projection sheet that I was working on prior to the show, I zeroed him out. They did start Jamie Kaiser there in his place, only played 11 minutes, got into early foul trouble, completely useless in that game. Very tough to peg because I've been waiting for Kaiser to start. Really was quite excited about him getting the start there, but he was awful. A chance for him to bounce back here if he starts again, but there's no guarantee that the minutes will come. Now, the starting 5 was a little bit different for Maryland in that game, and come to find out the reason why, obviously because the hand issue for Geronimo, but also they brought Deshaun Harris-Smith off the bench, started Matty Traore. Now, Matty Traore had 8 points, 5 rebounds in 20 minutes. He was fine. Deshaun Harris-Smith ended up playing 42, the double overtime game. They used him a lot. So I suspect he'll slide back in the starting lineup. But we also saw off the bench Jahari Long play 28 minutes. Only 6 points there. a lot of empty minutes for him. He projects quite well because I think he's going to have to play a lot of minutes again, and this matchup is just obviously way, way better. So you have a 3-5 play in Jahari Long that even if he doesn't start, which he probably won't, you have a guy that you can utilize there looking at probably 20 minutes at minimum with the potential for almost 30, depending how this one shakes out. So Long is there as a speculative value. Harris Smith at 4.7 is probably someone that people are going to gloss over. That's a really cheap price for him. Now he's going through his freshman struggles. He's hit a wall, but this is a get-right matchup for him if those minutes are afforded to him, and I think that they will be. And then you have players like Dante Scott, who's priced fairly at 6.3. He's had some blow-up games, but I think you just make the decision to either pay all the way down for a Terrapins value or all the way up to Reese or Young. I don't really want to mess around with Dante Scott. Just not the play for me. All right, we're cruising right along here. On to Tennessee and Arkansas. 151 total, which is one of the highest on the slate, tied with Clemson. It is an 8.5-point spread. What can I say about Arkansas that we haven't already said a million times? Let me first pull up the box score for Arkansas so that you can see why it's so hard to predict minutes for this god dang team. As far as the projection sheet goes, it's really like if you can predict minutes, like you're going to nail it. Like that's the big thing. And it can be hard in college basketball. Very, very hard. None more difficult than this Eric Musselman coached Arkansas team. There's one player on this group that I can tell you will play 37 or 38 minutes. That's easy. Tremont Mark. He's going to be in there the entire way. So we know that. But we're not getting any kind of discount. It's nothing sneaky. It's a horrible matchup. He's priced at 7.4, which for him is actually not bad. But I can't imagine using him in this spot except for alt builds. But at least we know he's going to be on the floor. We don't know if the other guys will stay on the floor. L. Ellis ended up starting. That is the first time in 3 games he's played. So back-to-back DNPs. Then he starts and plays 37 minutes. How many minutes did he play in the game before the 2 DNPs? Well, he played 32 as a starter, and he was pretty decent. And we've seen him spot start over the last month of the season, and then we've seen him go 2 months worth of barely playing. Probably would have just preferred to stay at Louisville at this rate. But he plays 37 minutes against Georgia, has 15 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals. You would think he would be rewarded with another start, and he probably will. But there's no guarantee that that means he'll play 37 minutes again. In fact, there's probably a better chance of him starting and playing 4 minutes. That's a real possibility. Maybe you don't watch Arkansas games. You think I'm over-exaggerating. Chandler Lawson started last game and played 7 minutes. Maybe that's a one-off. Maybe that's kind of strange. Well, he played 20 minutes the game before that. Was pretty productive. 16 before that, and then 25 before that. But when he first got back into the starting lineup after playing a total of 4 minutes in 3 games, he started against Ole Miss and played 6. So really not a predictable metric there for Chandler Lawson in terms of minutes. Layden Blocker, who's the youngster, can't wait to see where he transfers to. Back-to-back starts, 25 and 29 minutes. Okay, Eric, you like this kid. You're going to use him. Your season's about over, so you're going to give him minutes. So he starts him again against Georgia. He plays him 7 minutes. Sorry if you use Layden Blocker there. Eric Musselman doesn't care. 7 minutes is what you get. Jeremiah Davenport, who was fairly productive at Cincinnati for a few years, probably should have stayed, ends up starting a few games earlier in the year. Then he goes to the bench, becomes completely irrelevant. I think most people forgot he even played for Arkansas. Then he gets a start against Georgia. It's like, okay, Jeremiah Davenport, value, getting a start. He played 3 minutes. So you just can't trust anyone as a starter that's not named Tremont Mark. Off the bench, Devo Davis made his magnificent return. We won't talk about the rumors of what's going on in the Arkansas program. Don't need to get into that. It's not important. It has no bearing on anything. But he played 35 minutes off the bench. Fairly productive. 4 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. Not bad. Keon Menefield, former Husky, probably should have stayed, plays 31 minutes off the bench, has a highly productive game, one of the best games he's had in probably a month. And now it seems like there's talk of him getting into the starting lineup. Mekhi Mitchell off the bench played 25. He's been highly productive. Jalen Graham, who had a really big game as a starter 2 games ago against LSU, played 31 minutes. that earned him a shot off the bench for some reason, playing only 14 minutes. So there is a chance Jalen Graham starts. Khalif Battle played 3 minutes off the bench, although he's apparently in the doghouse. There are rumors and rumblings that he told Coach Musselman to S his D. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but he played 3 minutes after that report, so probably was true. And there's a chance he could start. Maybe he'll be rewarded with a start. So really very difficult to peg this Arkansas team. Basically what I'm getting at here is if you're running multiple lineups, I think it makes sense to kind of rotate through some of these guys, especially since they're so cheap. Like Keon Benefield's only 4.5. We know he's got massive upside at that price. If Muss gives him 30-plus minutes, I don't care if it's against Tennessee or not, he'll take 15 shots, and he'll pay that price off on shots alone and buckets scored. No guarantee of him getting those minutes. I think it's actually safer if he doesn't start. Like if Benefield starts and everybody rushes to roster him, that's probably the kiss of death, and he's going to play like 5 minutes. So I think you actually want Benefield to not start. That's where you look to play him. L. Ellis at 4.8. He's pretty damn good, but may DMP. You just don't know. Layden Blocker's cheap, but Devo Davis at 4.2. The most likely situation or scenario here is he's probably going to start. And even at the 4.2 price for Davis, it's not as if he's been very productive this year. It's been a really rough season for him. I expected a lot out of him being in the program as long as he did, and just I don't even know if he's playable at 4.2. So really difficult, very cheap options across the board. Trevin Brazil still dealing with the knee issue. He's probably not going to be back this season from what I've heard. So they're going to keep playing musical minutes here at every position. Maybe Jalen Graham, who I do like, gets a minutes booster back in the starting lineup. But your guess is as good as mine. And there, if anyone tells you they have a beat or a read on Arkansas minutes outside of Tremont Mark, they are lying to you or they work for Miss Cleo. Tennessee, expensive. Dalton Connect 8.9, Zakai Zeigler 8.7, and Jonas Idu 7.8. All very good options in this spot. If you can afford one of them, definitely want to consider it. Idu probably not as much. I think he could likely will get into foul trouble dealing with this endless supply of athletic forwards that Arkansas does have. So I worry about him in that regard. Little bit pricey at the 7.8. I'd rather just go up and use a road-tested Zakai Zeigler, who has been just incredible the last few games. On the road against Kentucky, 26-13. At home against LSU, 17-9. We're talking about assist here. And then 15-6-6 against Texas A&M. And he's had 3+ steals in 3 straight games. He's just playing absolutely magnificently, fully healthy. I actually prefer to play Zeigler in this spot over Dalton Connect. And I've been as big a Dalton Connect fan as anyone heading into the season. I thought this was a slam dunk transfer that they got. He's been great, mostly a scorer, but you see he is rebounding pretty well lately. If anybody on Arkansas can D up, they're going to be looking to D up Dalton Connect. I just prefer Zeigler when they're both priced up like this because he has a little bit more safety due to his ability to rack up other stats besides scoring. But Dalton Connect's liable to score 40 real points as well. So keep that in mind. Triple J at 6.7 is too expensive for me. Had that nice blow-up game against Kentucky, but now he's back to, kind of just piddling along there and let that price drop. There is value to be had for Jordan Gainey, who seems to be locked into this bench role of 20-plus minutes. He is a high upside play at 4.4, especially in a matchup where if they do blow the doors off of what is a bad Arkansas team, he could see a spike of up to 25, 26 minutes and take a ton of shots. Against LSU, he was 3 of 6 from downtown, 6 of 9 overall, put up 30-plus fantasy points. He's got a sneaky upside as a possible tournament or seat-winning type of play. And looking at the rates there, Gainey's shot rate is above 24% now. When he came over from USC upside, he was a 31% shot rate guy, 28% usage rate, big-time performer for that exciting upstate program. In SEC play, his shot rate's now over 20% as well, and he has a steal rate above 3%. So he's a much better player off the bench than I think a lot of people probably realize, and most didn't watch him at upstate, I'm sure. As far as anyone else, Vescovi at 5.6 is just okay. That's a Mike Kutry play. He's a little bit spendy there. I'd rather him be at the low 5K range before we consider him. and then Jemiah Meshach at 4-3, but I'd rather play Gainey just because of the additional minutes and the better overall rates. All right, moving on to the next one here. We have UConn versus DePaul. The blowout concern is real. I always mention that blowouts are an overrated thing to worry about in college basketball, but this is a spot in which they already dealt with DePaul and lost minutes for their starters on the UConn side. They're 24-point favorites. It's on the road, total of 141. The prices on UConn are obviously pretty expensive overall, almost $9K for Tristan Newton. Now, we have a blowout to look at in their last game, which was 89-64 against Georgetown. Newton played about 30 minutes. I think 30 is fine, but he has already proven in blowout games that he won't keep the foot on the gas. He's one of the first to let up. He'll try to get everyone else involved. He's a very selfless player. I love Tristan Newton for that reason alone, but sometimes you want him to be selfish and take those shots. Only took 3 shots against Georgetown. Still put up almost damn near 30, but obviously paying a premium, you would need him to be in the game for more than just 28 to 30 minutes. I'm not so sure that's actually going to happen. Cam Spencer at 8-2. If you want to use a UConn pay up, I would prefer him over Newton because he has been getting the extra minutes in the blowouts. The Xavier game, which was an absolute joke, they won by 40 plus. He played 25, but pretty much in all other game scripts, for lack of a better term, he's been locked into about 34, 35 minutes. So his minutes haven't been trifled with as much, and he's pretty much locked into a 4X number here at worst. Donovan Klingen's finally up to a price at 7-7 where I think we can back it up a little bit. Just been plugging him in week after week, slate after slate. He doesn't need more than 16 to 17 minutes in this matchup to absolutely blow the doors off. We saw him in just 18 minutes against Xavier, put up 18 and 8 for 35 fantasy points. So he's not a complete write-off, but at 7-7, I don't know that we have the luxury to pay that price for him, knowing this one's probably not going to be close after the first 5 minutes. Alex Caravan returned, playing big minutes since 35 minutes against Butler, 29 against Georgetown. Didn't play particularly well against Butler after missing that time dealing with the ankle issue, but he put any notion of him struggling to bed there. 10 of 14 shooting, 4 of 7 from downtown. Such a versatile player. Priced back up at 7-3. Kind of missed the buck there if you didn't use him at 6-7. Not the cheapest price for him, but that's usually what he hovers around. He's a very safe play here, and I probably would tag him as my favorite UConn option of the slate if you do want to use one of these guys. Stephen Castle at 7-1. I'd rather play Caravan, especially knowing in the non-competitive games, he's been one to lose minutes as opposed to Newton and Ket Spencer, who's still getting around 30. Castle's dropped to 20 in the blowout against Xavier and 27 in the blowout against Georgetown. Still putting up solid numbers, right around 29 against Xavier, 21 against Georgetown, but we're not talking about a 6'5", 6'2", 6'1 price like in the past. We're talking about 7-1. I don't know that we can really utilize him. He's going to lose minutes to some of the other guys in his freshman class. We're talking about Jaden Ross, Solo Ball, Jalen Stewart, guys like that, where they're going to take 5, 6, maybe even 7 minutes potentially if this one's over by halftime. So Castle, probably not in the cards there. Hassan Diarra, you can mark him for 20. Just an okay place. Only 4-5 though. Samson Johnson, same thing at 4-4. Even in the blowout, we're probably talking like 15 minutes max. Not really that great. And then if you really wanted to get cute by trying to use Ross or Stewart, who are min price, you can. But it's not as if they're going to step in and play 15 to 20 minutes. They're going to be getting 3 to 5. So pretty lean. I would stick with Caravan, Spencer, plays like that, as opposed to anyone else on the team. DePaul still without Jico Carter. I don't think he's going to be back anytime soon, and he probably doesn't need to. Prices are all cheap on DePaul. Nobody above 5-5. Jalen Terry's playing just about every possible minute. One of the highest usage guys on the team now that he's healthy. But this matchup against UConn is horrible. He will be the one they key in on. They held him to just 9 last time they played back on January 2nd. That's a no-go. Elijah Fisher played 40 minutes against St. John's last time out. Pretty damn good game, I would say so myself. Priced at 5-3. He actually had 17 and 5 against UConn first time they played in 33 minutes, and he will get the luxury of facing their worst defender. So Fisher at 5-3 is a usable option if you want. Jaden Henley comes with guard forward eligibility at 5'2". He's okay as well, but obviously just kind of if you're looking to fill out your player pool, that's where you can look at him. KT Ramey, Sean Nelson, Churchill Abbas, plays like that are just not great. They're not going to rebound at all and probably just going to be getting stuffed in a locker. One note about props, Jeremiah Odin has been an absolute stone lock for the under. They've had his point prop at 9.5, 8.5. Keep hitting the under. I think last time it was 7.5, and I still hit the under. So we're getting pretty low here. I suspect that DK and PrizePicks, if they do even offer it, they probably won't soon. But if they do, it'll probably be 6.5 or 7. We're still hitting that under on Jeremiah Odin. He's losing minutes. He's not making shots. He's just totally out of the flow of the offense. Not that the Paul's offense has a flow. He hasn't hit above 10 points in any of the last 4, and we're just going to continue to slap that under here on Jeremiah Odin. So I wanted to make that clear. You're looking to diversify a little bit. You want to make some prop bets. That's one that you want, Jeremiah Odin under. As long as it's like 6.5 at minimum, you can still take the under. All right, and last game on the slate, Oregon State versus ASU. Now, this is strange to me because ASU 7-point favorites, total of 137. And I suppose Arizona State isn't as horrible as I make them out to be. They're not great. I think Bobby Hurley's not long for this world. He's going to end up coaching another program sooner rather than later. They are coming off a strong road win, 85-77 over Utah, which I think is a bit of an overrated squad anyways. But that's a lot. And Oregon State, while I think ASU, like I might underrate ASU and then overrate Oregon State. And I know Oregon State under Wayne Tinkle, they're only 11-13, but they're much tougher than I think their record states. Ken Pom has it 71-64. I think this one stays within 4 or 5 the entire way, and that just seems like a little bit too many points. There's so much that could go wrong for Arizona State there, and this Oregon State team really does have talent. Tyler Bilodeau, Jordan Pope, Dexter Akano, Casey Ibekwe, like there's some pretty talented guys on this team. Looking at the prices and what we can actually use, ASU's front court has been far more susceptible from a DVP standpoint. So that means Tyler Bilodeau at 6'6" is a pretty nice play. Most people will look past him. He's been under 20 fantasy points in his last 3, steadily playing a lot of minutes, taking a ton of shots there. Has just been in some tougher environments. Washington State, which is proving to be a much better team than anyone would have thought. Washington, which, I mean, no one does good against the Huskies, come on. And then a road matchup against USC in which they did get blown out. So things don't look great for them, but I think Bilodeau is in a position here where he could deliver a big game somewhere between 30 and 32 like he's done in the past. So he is kind of the quote-unquote hammer game, even though it's the same time as some of these others. But I do like Bilodeau there as a sneak. Jordan Pope at 7K, he's okay. He's going to be taking 20 shots, so you can't go wrong with that kind of volume at that price. But it is worth noting ASU's perimeter defense has stepped up, especially in conference play, and there has been far less fantasy production from the guards against this team than the front court. That probably leaves us off Dexter Akano as well, who is really inconsistent. He's priced above 5K. I don't really like him there. I do have interest in Casey Ibekwe. There is a huge risk for him to get into foul trouble, but if he can eclipse 20 minutes, stay on the floor there, he has a very good fantasy point per minute number, and his overall rates are strong too. 11.2% offensive rebounding rate, 22% usage rate, 7% block rate, draws almost 5 fouls per 40. It just is really hard to keep him on the court, and that's been his main issue. But at 4.3, he's worth taking a shot on in your various builds. On the ASU side, Sean Phillips is probably someone I'm still looking to use. He's priced at 4.8, so we're not getting the huge discount that we were earlier. His minutes are also kind of being split somewhat. Against Utah, he did start, played 12 minutes, but Bryant Sellebang played 16, and that's been kind of the case the last couple. Phillips did start against Colorado as well, but he played 17 there, and then Sellebang ended up playing around 15. So regardless of him starting or Bryant starting, it seems they're just going to be destined for splitting. It is worth noting that Sean Phillips has a relatively high foul rate when he's starting, so that has been part of the problem. And overall, his fouls per 40 rate it's going to make you faint, is 8.7 per 40. So very hard to trust. 7-footer, has to figure things out. He's only a sophomore, spent his freshman season at LSU. I do like him long-term. 4.8's a high upside play for him. And you see 14 fantasy points in 12 minutes, 17 in 17 minutes, 26 in 20 minutes, 20 in 13 minutes. Like, he's definitely a guy that can fill it up quickly before he does get into foul trouble. And the last time they played Oregon State, in 13 minutes, he had 13 points, 2 blocks, 3 rebounds for 21 fantasy points in that short order there. And that was when he's priced at 3.6, a little bit higher here at 4.8, but he has been highly efficient, and I do like him once again, especially if he continues to start. It's just going to be a lot of the fouls there for him. If Sellebang were to move into the starting lineup, he's there at 4.2. I wouldn't mind him either. He's hit 14 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3, and he's played a minimum of 13 minutes in each of the last 3 as well, and seems to be trending upward with a high water mark of 18. Now, it's kind of weird. He transfers to ASU and has pretty much been a non-factor, finding it hard to get minutes. But when he spent his sophomore season at Tulsa, he was a pretty high usage guy, an elite rebounder, combined rate of 37%, had a really elite fouls drawn marker there at Tulsa, and he only got 1.8 fouls per 40 called. Since he's come to ASU, his rates have doubled, not in a good way, but for fouls called to 3.5. And he's just a guy that hasn't been a factor for this team whatsoever. It's such a strange way to use him. I don't even know why he came here if they're not going to play him. So a little bit of frustration there because we know he has talent. So Phillips and Sellebang, both intriguing value options that we can look at. Kamari Lands has seen his minutes starting to trend in the right direction. He's only 3.7, low upside type of play, low floor type of play, but he is out there. Has guard forward eligibility. If you're really struggling to find some cheapie, you like the rest of your build, you can throw him out there and hope for that 3.5, 4x number to come. Adam Miller at 5.3 came off the bench, played 31 minutes. Might be time to consider him. This is a good spot against Oregon State, but he's just been so awful in this offense. Really hard to trust him, but the price is absolutely right. Jose Perez, who seemingly fell into the doghouse for a couple of games, blew up against Utah in 31 minutes, hit a couple threes, 21 points, 31 fantasy points. Just won't go away. He's like the Terminator. Jemiah Neal at 6.8. It's a little bit high a price for me, but he has scored back-to-back 30s. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing others chase that and me fading. If he ends up being somewhat chalky, I don't like that play. I'd much rather just go to 7.6 and play Frankie Collins, who is seemingly locked into about 30 fantasy points as a floor right now. Has played 36 plus minutes in 3 of his last 4. Very big matchup problem against Oregon State. Did have 14 and 6 steals against Oregon State last time they played on 5 of 16 shooting. All right, that wraps it up. Let's see if we can do this screen sharing business. And then talk about core and all that good stuff here. So right now I'm looking at a core. Let's get this to work. Keon Benefield, Layden Block. No, just kidding. So I want to core Jameer Young so bad. He projects so well at 8.5 too, like a ridiculously high score. This is a tougher one. Core play number 1, Malik Hall. As if you didn't know that. DVP special. I do think, and Jack Clark. Malik Hall and Jack Clark there. I'm giving you 2 forwards right off the bat, so I don't want to hear about how hard forward is today because it's not. We're just going to get that value with Clark, and we're going to play DVP special Malik Hall. So that does allow us, that's 2 cheapies at forward, allow us to play Jameer Young if we want to. We also have Kaderi Richmond, who I'm expecting to be uber chalk at 8K. And then we have kind of a sneakier look in Dylan Adewusu at 5.8. So there's a nice little group here coming together. But we'll go Jack Clark, Malik Hall, and Jameer Young just to throw those 3 out there. All right, let's do this. Let's do this. This one. All right. So I'm going to show you what I put up for our subs. Now I have a sheet that we enter like minutes and it auto-populates stuff. I don't actually share that one with everyone. I just copy and paste it over to a Google Doc there. So I'm going to show you both versions so you can see if it's something that you might be interested in. Share screen. All right. So what you're looking at here is basically just bare bones name, obviously price, team, and then I added minutes on it. Usually when I show it to the Discord subs, it has this column here, obviously the points, the value, and then I do adjust for FanDuel for those that play it there. I have it by team here, but usually just do the old little value, or let's go to the right one here, by value, and just post it out like that so you can see. So you can see here, Jameer Young at 38 minutes projects extremely high. Now what we use is game logs. We are 2 days behind, so we'll be adding those games from the last couple of days here to get the most accurate. But as we get in further to conference play, which we are damn near going to be at the end, we're going to find that it's very, very accurate to a point. We've been having some pretty good success. Yesterday was a good example. Darian Williams, who projected extremely high on the sheet, was only 8% owned. Not a lot of people rostered him. I didn't even roster him in my main like an idiot. And he put up a huge game, and that was one that a lot of people had missed. So some of these are going to be obvious. Guys with great rates, that's also factored into this. So Norchad Omir, even though he'll be in some bad matchups sometimes, he has really solid rates. Expecting him to play 36 minutes. You can see right here. Projects for 41 fantasy points, 4.6K. Solid overall look. Sometimes it overrates players because it doesn't have enough game logs. So you see like Jerry Long, who missed some time here, does project him pretty high there at 15.6. That's a fairly aggressive projection. And that's something that I do tell my guys in the Discord, like, hey, it's overrating this player. I think it's underrating this player. And then obviously a lot goes into the minutes. Like if Long plays 26 minutes, that's pretty solid for 3-5 regardless. Very good chance he doesn't. That might be aggressive. As it goes on, I'll adjust that through the day and do our things there. So still a work in progress, but that is what we see. Obviously Arkansas guys as well, but that's usually what I show them. And then let me go into, stop sharing this, and then real quick, this one. All right. There it is. All right. So here you can see what goes into it, right? So basically when I input minutes, it'll auto-populate, just pretty basic stuff, but you'll see some people wondering where maybe I'm pulling those numbers from. It's not out of my ass or anything, but it'll show like, they'll be auto-populating their stats. So that's where I can look at for props. And I'll start sharing this stuff, people that want to do prop betting and stuff. If there's something that's really obvious, what I used to do, which is share a screenshot of the actual document. Now I've been doing the Google Doc copy and paste. But if there's like a big discrepancy, like maybe tomorrow Tremont Mark's points prop is 16.5, for example, I have him at 19.5. Like that'd be something that we can share and start to maybe look at, especially as it gets more and more accurate, which I am tracking that and finding that the accuracy has been pretty damn solid. I'm just an idiot and like to play with my lineups and end up fading guys that I shouldn't. But that is pretty much the document there. Pretty basic stuff. Wanted to show that to people had been asking about it. If you're not a member of FTN yet, still plenty of time to do so. Lots of content. We do written content for each main slate, a projection sheet for both the main and night. On Saturdays, we do main, what I call main, but I guess early, afternoon, and night. And then, of course, 3 or 4 shows a week. Some of those are going to begin, especially here in March, behind the paywall. So those will be subs only, and those will be more like pre-lock stuff where we're breaking down lineups and news, and then also going into the brackets. We'll have our own bracket reveal, lots of contests and all kinds of content here. You also have the betting tracker on FTN Bets, the PrizePicks tracker on FTN Daily. Pretty much something for everyone, whether you do DFS, props, betting, all of that good stuff. We are a one-stop shop. The only thing I have left to do is to get a reliable optimizer so that we can truly be one-stop shop for all things college basketball. Appreciate everyone who continues to support the show. Make sure on your way out you smack that like button. Appreciate it. Everybody have a really great night. A happy Valentine's Day if you celebrate it with your missus or your mister. And I will be back Friday night, 9 p.m. PST to break down the big Saturday, possibly with the special guest. Otherwise, you guys take it easy, and I'll see you. Minya.